Hello, Gearspace. Welcome to Superbooth 2024. I am Chris with Moog Music, and we are here showing off Spectravox, which is out now and available everywhere. Spectravox is a 10-band analog spectral processor capable of a whole lot of things. Just to start off with a sound here, we can hear Spectravox coloring the sound of DFAM. And so just to bring it back a little bit to explain how Spectravox works, it's a 10-band filter bank, which means that we have a low-pass filter, a high-pass filter, and 8 band-pass filters in between. And those are going to color any input into that filter bank. And so we can start with the built-in oscillator of Spectravox. And if we can use the 10 filter bands to sculpt that tone. And the interesting thing about Spectravox is the spectral shift control, which allows you to move all 10 filter bands simultaneously. So right now we just have the low pass filter, and we can use that as a classic low pass filter, but we can also bring in the high pass. And we have an extremely wide notch filter here, or we can bring in some of the bands in between. And especially with resonance and adding in some LFO, we get really interesting phaser-like comb filter sounds out of Spectravox. We have the VCO, and we can also fold in some white noise. And we can also, of course, plug any external sound into Spectravox, plugging into the carrier, in this case DFAM. And so here we have DFAM coming into Spectravox, and we can use the filter bands just like on a fixed filter bank, but on Spectravox those filters aren't fixed, of course. We can move all of them with the spectral shift control. We can also, so we can basically color the sound of DFAM in any way we want. We can also run it through our program input, which has an external, which has a preamplifier on it. And if we run that into the carrier, we can also crunch up Spectravox with the external gain here and edit the filter bands, move the filters around, add resonance, take resonance away, add the LFO in for sort of psychedelic swirling controls. We can also, by switching Spectravox into Vocoder mode, we now use basically the DFAM as the program input, which essentially will decompose the sound of DFAM into 10 bands, because there's a second filter bank under the hood, and those 10 filter bands will capture the tonal information of DFAM in this case, and map it onto the Spectravox filter bank. So here we hear the DFAM, in this case, vocoding the internal oscillator of Spectravox. So you can get things like formant sounds, anything like that. And by using the spectral shift controls and also modulating some of the Spectravox controls, so we can take, for example, the DFAM sequencer out and use that to modulate the shift parameter, we can get really interesting movement. We can also take some of the outputs of DFAM, for example, and modulate the filter band strength. So getting some interesting amplitude modulation of all of the frequency bands. And we can do a whole lot of other things too. We can basically use the DFAM sequencer to sequence Spectravox's internal oscillator. So sorry, sometimes need longer patch cables, but if we take the trigger output and trigger Spectravox and take the pitch output of DFAM and run it into the Spectravox oscillator, then we can use DFAM to sequence Spectravox's oscillator, and we get a nice, interesting, sculptable standalone synth voice, which is not the typical oscillator into one filter, but an oscillator into 10 filters. And then we can also, one thing we really like doing is not using an external sequencer to sequence Spectravox necessarily, but taking the gate output of something like DFAM and using that to go directly into the carrier input, thus pinging all 10 filters. So especially if you turn up the resonance, you start to get these really interesting woodblock marimba tones, and you can shape those tones and control like the overtones of your synthesized woodblock here with the 10 filters. And you can also then, with the spectral shift control, move all 10 filters and start to sequence your marimba woodblock here. And yeah, that's just the tip of the iceberg for Spectravox. We basically wanted to take the idea of a vocoder and pull it, stretch it apart, and give you access to all the things that make up a vocoder to allow you to mangle and pull apart a vocoder any way you see fit. So yeah, that's Spectravox. It's out now, and yeah, it's $5.99 US, and I can't remember the price in euros, but it's either $5.99 or $6.99, one of the two. And yeah, it's available everywhere. So go out and have fun with it. It's cool.